Welcome. So for those of you who don't have me in class, I'm Krista Burke, and I'm an instructor in the College of Business on the student engagement team. I'm excited to welcome all the students from our creativity, culture, and the workplace class, and everyone here in honor of Susan J. McGregor, and to celebrate the efforts of the College of Business. So the College of Business takes seriously their work in advancing and supporting the voices of women and all underrepresented groups in business, as evidenced by our curriculum, where we're learning to share our perspectives and to ask for other perspectives in a way that opens dialogue. And we get to see examples of organizations that demonstrate those that are more inclusive and more diverse, are often more profitable, innovative, and more competitive in their field. So tonight, you get a little glimpse of what it looks like beyond the college classroom from our speaker, so it should be really exciting. And so as you're listening, I want to remind you that in the classroom really is just the start of it. We know that you're the future of the workforce that will go on and be innovating and be making the changes that we hope to see made. You will be the one including the voices in your workplace. So know that it starts here, it starts with you. And also remember, there's an open Q&A at the end. So as you're listening, be thinking of questions you'd like to ask. Take that opportunity to find your voice, take your leadership, and share it with all of us. And the participation code, the QR code, is at the very end, so make sure you stay until the end of the Q&A session to mark your participation. Without further ado, I know we're all excited, so I would like to give a warm welcome to the Dean of the College of Business, Tim Carroll.
All right, outstanding. Thank you, Krista. Well, welcome. Good to have you all with us here tonight. This lecture series was established through the estate of Susan J. McGregor, in keeping with her interest in supporting women's leadership and her alma mater. Susan graduated from the College of Business in 1985 and passed away in 2014 after a courageous battle with cancer. Her career included stints at the IRS and Coopers and Lybrand before she joined Microsoft, and rose through the ranks of the tax department to become one of the company's first general managers in 2007. She was a member of Alpha Phi and a strong Beaver believer. In keeping with her interest in supporting women's leadership and Oregon State, her family established an endowed lecture fund, as well as endowed scholarship and professional development funds in the names of Susan and her mother, Jean. A sincere thank you to Susan's family for making this evening's lecture possible. We are honored to continue her legacy at OSU. I know I speak for all the faculty and staff when I say that I'm proud that our college supports events like these and demonstrates our commitment to addressing gender inequities and building inclusive cultures in the workplace. For the past 2 years of lectures, we've talked a lot about significant employment losses during the pandemic and how women, and especially women of color, have disproportionately felt the impact of unemployment and underemployment. And while the latest research is showing that we've had 23 months of consecutive job gains for women, there are still over 1 million fewer women in the workplace than there were before the pandemic. And beyond underrepresentation in the workforce, we also want to make sure we're doing everything we can to ensure that women have opportunities to advance into more top leadership roles. So I want to echo Krista's words that while your learning begins here at OSU, you are the future of the workforce that can and will make lasting and impactful changes in this space. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the evening, Ann Doepner. This marks Ann's 17th year with the Minnesota Vikings and her 4th year as the team's Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. In her role, she leads the team's diversity and inclusion strategy. She also works to implement employee engagement, inclusion, and learning initiatives to create a sense of belonging with a vision of enabling employees to bring their best selves to work. In her previous role as the Vikings Director of Football Administration, Ann was responsible for salary cap management and compliance with the NFL's collective bargaining agreement. She worked closely with the personnel department on contract proposals, negotiations, and player budgets. She served as the primary contract negotiator for rookie contracts from 2017 to 19. Ann has been a staunch advocate for women's career and professional development. She is the president and founding member of the Twin Cities chapter of Women in Sports and Events. She's a native of St. Paul, Minnesota. She has her bachelor's degree from the College of St. Benedict, and she still lives in St. Paul with her husband and their children, Alice and James. So please join me in welcoming Ann Doepner.
Hello. How is everyone tonight? So before we get started, I've been taking a little bit of heat for wearing my yellow. And now I'm realizing I've got green on up there. So just this juxtaposition was not intentional, I really promise, because I work for the Vikings. So yellow and green to me is also a combination that I do not love to see. I do also want to echo the Dean and Krista's remarks and just acknowledge the legacy that Susan J. McGregor has left. I am deeply honored to be able to play a small part in supporting her mission of advancing women. I also want to point out that yesterday, February 1st, is a day known as National Girls and Women in Sports Day. Is anyone here familiar with that day? I just want to ask, could we see in the audience, who here, if you're an athlete, a coach, an administrator, if you played at the high school level, can you stand up? Females, women? Here we go. And this is the point where I should sit down because I've never played sport. But I just want to recognize all of you as well. There's a lot of women that just stood up at this moment. The sports world is more ready for you than it ever has been. And the skills and the traits that you learn as an athlete will lead you to great things in your professional life as well. So just don't ever forget that. Don't sell yourself short in any stretch of the imagination. Okay. So I promise you, I'm anti-duck, okay, and this is gonna underscore that point. I'm not gonna tell you the story of this slide right now. We're gonna come back to it later in the presentation, but I just want you to remember this. So just hold this image in your mind as we continue. And I don't think it's gonna turn out really well for the duck. That's just a little spoiler. Okay. And before we get into the rest of what I want to share with you, I have a brief video, so if you don't mind indulging me. This video was done, this was an initiative from NBC Sports in 2018 called On Her Turf. And the goal of the program, of their programming, was to highlight women working at NFL teams in roles where they had previously either never been represented or had been very underrepresented. And they chose to highlight me, and it's a great feature that I think helps give you a little bit of perspective on the job I used to have when I was in football operations that will help tell my story a little bit as we go forward here. I'm going to try to get to it. Oops. All right. We will move along without the video. Don't worry about it. What the video showed was it was a very glamorous, sort of dramatized depiction of what I did for a living, right? It followed me through the hallways of our facility. It showed me on the sidelines of the games, you know, on game day, having direct access to our players and the environment, the exciting environment that is an NFL game. And the goal of the program, the programming and the series that they were putting together was to inspire women to say, here's a job that you can have, and doesn't this look amazing? And it sure did look amazing, right? It looked like everything, you know, I'm surrounded by famous people, I have the best seats in the house, I get VIP status everywhere I go, and some of that is true, right? Working in sports comes with some perks, I won't lie to you. It is fun, it's exciting, you sort of live and die with the team, and it bonds you as an organization, and you have this one common goal, which is sort of unusual in a lot of business environments, to really have that one really clear, undefined or defined goal that that unites everybody, which is to win a championship. But what I want to share today is that stuff's easy. That stuff's easy to talk about and to point to and be like, I want to be like that because it looks so amazing. But until we actually can talk to each other about what is the full picture, what goes on behind the scenes, yes, that's what I was doing in 2018, but from 2006 to when I joined the Vikings to 2018 when that video was produced, what was I going through to get there? And what can you take from that message? That's what I want to talk about today. So this is one of my favorite quotes that's up on the screen from the author and speaker and sociologist Brené Brown. You have a choice. And this is why my talk is titled Authentic Leadership. Because if you're not being authentic to yourself, you're not also helping anyone else who may come behind you. So you have a choice. You can either walk inside your own story and own it, or you can stand to the side, you can stand outside your story and hustle for your worthiness. And if I just chose to let a glamorous video of me in my football job speak for who I am and what I believe in and what I do and what my professional role is as a person, I'm doing a disservice to anyone else who might come behind me. So I want to show you what my life was actually really like most days. So that was my office. I know most of the audience may not be parents yet, but if so, or if you're planning on it someday, this may be what your day could look like. This was in the middle of a deep cold snap in Minnesota. We're in the middle of another one right now, so I'm really happy to be in balmy Oregon. They canceled school. It got cold enough in Minnesota to cancel school, which means minus 32 wind chill or below. If it's minus 31 wind chill, you're going to school. So they canceled school. My kids were very young in this photo. They're 11 and 9 now. I was stuck with a choice. I had to either stay home. My husband had meetings that he could not miss or reschedule that day at his job. So I could either stay home, not get any work done, and take care of the kids, or I could try to do it all. So I chose option B. Now, mind you, this was well before the pandemic. There was no, in the sports world, there was no remote work option at that time. You were either there working, and usually there working meant very, very long hours there working, or you were just not there. And I just thought, well, that's kind of silly. I can bring my kids in, they're well-behaved and good listeners, and they'll be peaceful and quiet, and I'll get my work done. And moreover, I'll send a message to younger people who may be starting their family or maybe considering starting a family and wondering, can I do that and grow my career at the same time? And I thought, it'll be great. So I brought my kids in, we marched through the cafeteria. I was very visible about the fact that I had my kids there with me. I wanted to make a point. And this is not a place, also a work environment where you brought your kids. It was just very much separate. It was work or home. By the time we got to my office, this might have been, I mean, my kids are still wearing their coats, so it was probably about 5 seconds in. My daughter appears to be trying to deface office property, and then my son is giving me sort of an evil grin that I'm not sure what he's probably a collective bargaining agreement he's marking up there or something. And I'm clearly out of control. My intern at the time took this photo. Nobody's listening to me. I'm trying to redirect, and needless to say, I got no work done that day, none whatsoever. And I went home and I felt frustrated because I was trying. It was not for a lack of trying, but this is who I am, right? I am trying to get my job done, but also live my life and support my family in the way that I know I need to. And so what happens is, when you run into situations like that, where you find yourself being different in some way, and then it just keeps happening over and over again, and you run into kind of these barriers and these walls where you realize, I'm trying, and it's not for a lack of trying, but I'm not getting where I want to go, you start to kind of do this, right? You start to sort of disguise and cover up because you want to be part of that majority group so desperately. So I spent a lot of time waddling around that office that I worked in, trying to pretend I was a penguin, but really I'm a cat with just like a fake penguin nose that actually doesn't really look much like their noses at all. But this is what I looked like, and I especially want to point out the look on the cat's face. I was terrified a lot because I thought, I'm going to get found out that I'm different. I'm not going to be able to achieve or succeed because I'm different. So what was happening was I was spending all my energy trying to blend into the environment that was created. when really it should be the environment that should be adaptable to whatever the people in that environment need from it. And that's at the root of all diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts at the end of the day. So rewinding a little bit, when I first started at the Vikings in 2006, I came in as an executive assistant in the football operations department. So very much an entry-level role where I was handling the administrative aspect of contract filings, but I wasn't sort of advising on them or contributing to the process in that way, so to speak. But when they hired me, part of the interview process was a 20-question football quiz. So they wanted someone, and this makes sense, right? If you're being hired to work in an industry, they want to know that you care about, that you understand, that you have an investment in maybe the product or whatever the company is selling, that you have some understanding because you're going to work harder if it's something that you care about. So I aced the quiz, obviously. Got 19 out of 20. You can catch me later to find what the one question was that I got wrong. Still keeps me up at night. But I got the job. But then what started was, when I came into work for the first day, and in the first days and weeks, I kept hearing, oh, that's the one who knows all the stuff about football. And I thought, well, I'm looking around, I'm like, well, don't we work for an NFL team? Shouldn't we all kind of know some stuff about football? I mean, why is it different or special that I do? And I realized pretty quickly that it was because I was a woman, and it was surprising. And I got that not only in the office, but outside as well, right? I would meet people in a social setting, and you kind of just go through the usual getting to know each other chatter, and inevitably the conversation would be, so what do you do for a living? And when I would tell them, I would get a lot of times, maybe eight or 9 times out of 10, it would be met with like, oh, wow, you do that? Wow, that's surprising. And I don't think that that was ever meant maliciously, but it's the repeated being confronted with that conversation that is what becomes difficult. And then a lot of times, it would lead to what I call the quiz. And so any woman working in sports will tell you she's had to answer the quiz multiple times over. So what the quiz looks like, oh, you negotiate NFL contracts for a living? Well, what's Patrick Mahomes' average per year? Or like, how much signing bonus did Tom Brady get on his last contract? Like, literally would get put on the spot to prove that I had the qualities that I needed to do the job that I just stated that I do for a living. And so my favorite comparison for that is if you meet a CPA or a tax specialist at a party, you don't just quiz them on tax code to say, well, you got to prove it to me. I don't believe you that you're a CPA. Like, let's walk through the new tax revisions. So the quiz, that was another thing that I heard that I took in all the time, because I had to prove myself, right? Coming here yesterday, flying out here from Minneapolis, Tom Brady announced his retirement again, right before I boarded the plane. So I get the notification on my phone. Obviously, this is a huge piece of news to hit the NFL. I want to hear what the talking heads have to say and just digest it and take it all in. It's a big moment. So I get in my seat and I pop on NFL Network, and the guy next to me says, oh, really, NFL Network? So it's just those continuing comments that remind you that you're different, that start to add up to a belief of something about you if you let it. Other things that I heard when I announced my first pregnancy, I had several people ask my boss if I was coming back to work. Is Anne going to come back to her job? Are you going to be looking for her replacement? My husband got exactly 0 of those questions when he announced that he was going to be a father for the first time. And then the most impactful thing that I heard, I think all of these things that I heard that I took in from my environment, by themselves, and even collectively, you can kind of deal with, you just understand that, yes, I'm different, but it doesn't mean anything negative about me to that point. But in 2017, that sort of changed. I'd been promoted to the director level in 2016, which meant that I did have more of a say in the contract process and what our philosophy was going to be on spending, and really an impact on the business side of our roster. And I was contributing in these meetings and advising on our strategy. And I went to an NFL league meeting, and there were various meetings all happening at the same time at this same resort in Arizona for different subsections of the NFL. And so I was there for a women's leadership meeting. And then our general manager and our assistant general manager were also there for personnel and scouting meetings as well. And so they texted me and my female colleague and said, when your meetings are done, let's catch up. Would love to hear how your day went. And it was March, some basketball games were on, March Madness was underway. We decided to just meet up at the patio, the veranda, to recap on the day and connect a little bit. So we were all sitting there, just getting caught up, and another NFL general manager walks out onto the patio area where we're sitting, and this is someone who I knew who he was as soon as he walked out there. He's a name, I guess I will say. And so I thought in my head, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's him. And he walked over to our group because he knew our GM, he knew our assistant GM, he didn't know me or my other female colleague. At least I didn't think he did. And he walked up to the group and got introduced around. And then when he was told my name, when I was introduced and said, this is Anne, he paused and he said, wait, you're Anne? And I was totally flattered, right? I had this instant sensation of, oh my God, I made it. I'm in the circle. He knows me. Like I'm part of the group. I'm not the cat penguin anymore. Like I'm the actual penguin, and I'm part of the penguins, and they don't think I'm different, and this is great. And I said, yeah, I'm Anne. I'm really honored to meet you. And in his very next breath, he said, so that means you're my problem. And I was obviously very confused. And I said that. I said, well, how could I just kind of jokingly bantered back to him and said, how on earth could I be your problem? I just met you 10 seconds ago. And he said, well, are you trying to negotiate contracts for your team? And I said, well, I'm not trying to, I am. And he said, well, that's why you're my problem. And he went on to say, because a woman on my staff found that out, and now she's asked for the same opportunity, and so I have to deal with that. This is not even 6 years ago. And so then my stomach sank. This was not the, oh, wow, you know a lot about sports, or, are you staying home to raise your kids type of stuff, right? This felt more like a direct message launched, like, you don't belong here, I don't want you here. I don't like having you around, you make me uncomfortable. And fortunately, and I will always be forever grateful, the male executives that I was with stepped in right away, not even a hesitation, and just said, hey, listen, what are you talking about? Anne's not a problem, she's part of our solution, she's on the team, she's part of the deal, and just cut it off, and then we moved on to another topic, and I think I probably left shortly thereafter, but that was a pivot. I can't underscore how pivotal a moment that was in my career and in my path, because I feel like if I had not had that show of allyship in the moment, not afterwards, not coming up to me afterwards and saying, well, that was really rude what he said to you, or even addressing him after the fact that it happened right there in front of me in the moment, I think saved my career, honestly. Because I feel like trying to come back from something like that when I'd been dealing with years already of pushing and trying to be welcomed in, and then to have that one dropped on me right after I felt like I was finally kind of getting there, I think it would have been devastating, to say the least. So the fact that I took in all of this messaging from the outside ended up creating messaging inside my own head in addition. So I can't necessarily control the environment, right? I know that there are not, at the time, there were not a lot of women in positions like mine. It was unusual, right? It's novel, it's interesting, that is fine. I can talk, I can navigate those conversations. I can't change the environment. I can't change the fact that people may react with some surprise. I can't change the fact that there may be some traditionally held beliefs about can you work and have kids, those kind of things. But unfortunately, I also had a really hard time controlling what was happening in here on top of that. So try as I might not to let that happen, I did. I let my own internal messaging compound what I was receiving from the outside. So I hid, I shoved things down, I covered them up because I was already obviously different. And there were things that I couldn't hide, right? Clearly female, at a certain point I became a mother, right? These are very visible aspects of who I am. I couldn't hide those. But there were things that I could definitely totally hide or at least minimalize. My college major. I majored in French. I was ashamed of that. Like, why? I didn't want anyone to know because I thought that that meant the fact that I didn't have, and I have a bachelor's degree, that's the highest level of education I've attained. The fact that I didn't have a law degree or even an MBA, like pretty much all of my counterparts at every other NFL team, I thought meant that I was especially not worthy of being in the role that I was in. I never called attention to the fact that I entered the industry as an executive assistant for the same reason. I didn't want people to think, oh, she really isn't qualified. She's just making it up as she goes along, or is just, fortunate, right place, right time, those kind of things. So I didn't call attention. I would change the topic. I would do anything I could to just not call attention to anything else that I felt like fed into that story that I didn't belong and that I wasn't great at what I was doing. I was coasting, right? I wasn't growing. I was just maintaining status quo and just trying to survive. It was exhausting. And turns out that's not sustainable. And the way that I found this out was interesting. So in 2018, so this is a little bit less than a year after that comment was made to me at the NFL League meeting in Arizona, I was invited to speak at the Women's Careers in Football Forum in Orlando. So the Women's Careers Forum is an amazing program that was started by a woman at the NFL named Sam Rappaport, who's doing amazing things to advance opportunities for women on the football side of operations. So we're seeing, at the Super Bowl this year, we're gonna see our first Black female coach ever, Autumn Lockwood for the Eagles. Only the fourth overall female coach at all to coach in a Super Bowl. We've seen our first female referees. We're seeing female athletic trainers on practically every team's sideline now. So this is all due to the efforts of Sam to elevate and get these women to the next level. So I was invited to speak at the forum in 2018, because again, this isn't that long ago, but there just weren't a whole lot of us to invite to speak at these type of programs from NFL teams. So, and I was always happy to show up and contribute and support women who wanted to get in. So at the beginning of the presentation, you remember the whole video thing that didn't work? There was a picture of me seated next to Jerry Reese. That was from that panel. So Jerry Reese was the general manager of the New York Giants, I want to say for about a dozen years in the mid-2000s. They won 2 championships under his leadership. Cut off in that photo, but seated next to Jerry was David Shaw, who was the Stanford football coach for many, many years until he recently just resigned, but we know he'll show back up somewhere. He's an amazing leader. And then next to Coach Shaw was Coach Ron Rivera, who at the time was the head coach of the Carolina Panthers and is now the head coach of the Washington Commanders. So when I was asked to speak on this panel, I knew it was going to be me and those 3 guys. And I just remember thinking, well, this does not make sense. Again, like why would anyone want to hear what I have to say when you can hear from these Super Bowl winning executives and coaches who are at the highest level of their profession? And I'll never forget, we were lined up sort of backstage in our order, ready to come on to take our seats for the panel. And I was next to Jerry. And he leaned over to me and he said, I find this kind of funny that they invited me to speak here. And I thought, what are you talking about? You're this accomplished, you've been executive of the year, you've won Super Bowls. Of course, anyone would want to hear what you have to say. And he said, I think they're going to really want to hear more of what you have to say, because you really represent for them that could be them up on the stage. And it was just this huge light bulb moment for me where I was like, even a guy like Jerry Reese can have that moment where he feels like, oh, maybe I don't belong here. And maybe in that moment I did maybe have a little bit more value to what I could share with the participants. So I took that stage, and it clicked for me that I need to share in this moment. This is 40 women were in the audience. They were carefully selected to participate in this forum. They were working full-time in college athletics, in every aspect of football operations that you can imagine, and we're just looking for their shot to get into the NFL, right? How many male equipment managers will you see at college level operations that can naturally move into the NFL? Women, it just doesn't happen at those same levels. They're not getting the access, the opportunities, the belief that they can do the job. So that was what this forum was designed for, was to create the access to break down those barriers. And so I thought, I'm not here to give them the shop talk and to tell them all the fancy things. They need to hear what the real deal is, because I want to demystify it for them. And this is my goal for every young woman coming up in the industry now. I want your growth to happen faster than mine. That is my overarching goal. There's no reason it should have taken me 12 years to get to the director level. I want that to be faster for every qualified woman in the space going forward. And so I just went for it. I was really vulnerable in that panel. I talked about some of the difficulties I faced. I talked about some people not believing in me along the way and how that made me feel. And I talked about the other stuff that I hid for the first time publicly. I just said, hey, listen, I didn't know I was going to be in this role. I wasn't at your age, at your stage of your college career, knowing that I'm going to end up managing an NFL salary cap by the time I'm in my 30s. That was nowhere on my radar, ever, at this stage. But I got there. And it was through a series of twists and turns, and also proving myself and working really, really hard. And I just wanted to share that with them. You don't have to have it figured out right now. Your story could go a lot of different ways. And I leaned into that, and I said, it's made me feel really insecure a lot that I didn't come in with these credentials, that I still maybe don't have all of those credentials, that I came in at a certain level, that I don't have the degree that maybe correlates with the work that I do now. And I took up space. And so for the first time, I was unabashedly proud of what I had achieved in a public forum. And I left the stage, and I had so many women participants come up to me and say, thank you, I needed to hear that, because I'm not sure that I have everything that it takes. And these are women who are actually working in sports at the D1 collegiate level and have this amazing resume, and they still doubted that they had the credentials that they needed to get to the next level. I think they just needed to hear from someone else that we all doubt ourselves a little bit, and that's okay. And the vulnerability that I shared that day then gave me the courage to do things like what I'm doing now, like the work that I now do leading our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts for the Minnesota Vikings, is to just have real talk about what's going on, what is holding you back, what are the beliefs that you're holding that are limiting you. Okay, so back to the duck. The story of the duck. It's really not a duck, I just didn't want to have his face up there. But this was the cover page of a resume that I received when I was in my director of football administration role. So this was an upcoming grad who wanted a job like the one that I had at that point. And he sent me, I also want to say his resume was at least 8 or 10 pages. It was like a portfolio. But this was the full bleed cover photo that accompanied the 8 to 10 page extensive resume, and had not been in the workforce at all at that point. And he's literally like just taking up space on the page, right? Like holding his arms out, commanding whatever's going on in front of him, and saying, I'd like an opportunity for a job with you. So I received this in my email inbox. That same afternoon, I get a text from a close female friend at work who had just turned in her performance review to her supervisor. So we have a scale, right? Needs development, below expectations, meets expectations, exceeding expectations, and then the top one is just, phenomenal, whatever that might be. And she had submitted her performance review. Her boss sent it back to her because she said, hey, listen, I am looking to promote you this cycle, and what you gave me for your self-evaluation, first of all, is not indicative of all the value that you've added to this team this year. And so therefore, it is not going to allow me to advocate for your promotion. You're not helping me out here. So she said, try again. Just talk yourself up, celebrate everything that you accomplished this year, so I can help you grow in your career when I put this forth for promotion. So we're talking on the phone, and I was like, okay, so what's the problem? And she said, so I did all that. I added more about what I've done for the team, but she's like, my question for you is, I checked the box, meets expectations. Do you think it's too much if I switch it to exceeds expectations? And she was like just laboring over that decision about, oh, am I gonna come across as too cocky, too self-assured? And I just couldn't help but notice the contrast of what I had received in my email inbox from someone I knew nothing about, hadn't accomplished really anything that I could tell, but sure thought that he did, and was taking up the space and celebrating himself with nothing to go off of. And then this female peer who was receiving direct feedback, her boss telling her, put it all in there, you're amazing. And she just was sweating over ticking one box up higher on the scale to reflect the content she was sharing in her performance review. And so what I did was I told her about this resume I received in my inbox earlier in the morning. And I said, Amy, just have the audacity. Yes, check box 4 out of 5 instead of 3 out of 5. I think that's a pretty safe bet that that's what she wants you to do. And so there's me. Oh wait, it's a beaver. Sorry. So there's me now taking up space. So now this is what I get to do. I get to take up space, but the whole reason I do it now is for the purpose of allowing other girls and women to do it too. And the biggest irony of women taking up space is that, believe me, the more space you take up, the more room it actually creates for other women. So I did a talk about 5 or 6 months ago, and one of the questions I got, and we'll have some Q&A coming up here soon, and I'm really excited for that, was a woman in the audience just said, how did you have the nerve to speak up and to speak out and to start advocating for yourself and to advance your career? And it was funny because nobody had really ever asked me that before about how did you have the nerve? How were you brave enough to do that? Because I never really questioned it. I just knew that I was centering the conversation on those who should be centered. And to me, that's everyone who's gonna come up behind us. So for me tonight, that's you all. For me in this photo, this was the NFL Women's Forum, the year that Minneapolis hosted the Super Bowl in 2018. I spoke on a panel there, and I was heading back to the office, and I got a text from our PR staffer who said, we have an interview request, there's a media request. Someone wants to interview you here on site before you head back. Do you have a few minutes? And I said, oh, cool, sure. Who is it with? Thinking it was a media network or something like that. And he's like, the Capitol Hill Times, Capitol Hill Middle School in St. Paul, Minnesota, which happens to be my alma mater. And he said, there's 4 young women reporters from Capitol Hill Times who want to have a sit down and exclusive with you. And so be still my beating heart, I sat down with these 4 amazing young women who took up space. They went for it. They asked me really, really intelligent questions. They were prepared beyond measure. And they wanted to go back to their school and share a story of an alum from their school who was now a woman working in the NFL. And so this is what it's all about. So take up space because it creates more for everyone else to come behind you. That's what I have for you tonight. Happy to entertain questions.
Thank you, Anne. Let's give her one more round of applause.
Thank you.
Amazing. So now we're gonna move
Away from each other.
We're going to move into the Q&A portion of tonight. And like Anne said, this is one of her favorite parts, so don't be shy. And so we have 2 microphones here at the front. So anyone who has a question is invited to come up to the microphone, and then we'll kind of go one at a time. So please don't be shy, ask your questions. Anyone who does ask a question will receive a copy of a book, Shared Sisterhood. Anne, do you want to share a little bit about why you chose this book?
Yeah, so Shared Sisterhood is a recently published book. How I found out about it was through an episode of the Harvard Business Review podcast. There's a podcast series, Women at Work. Some of you may know about it. If you don't, please check it out. It's full of tons of really practical advice for navigating the workplace as a woman. And there was a 2-part episode that came out a couple of years ago called Shared Sisterhood. And it was presented by Tina Opie and Beth Livingston, who eventually authored this book. And the concept was about how women in the workplace can unite to support each other across racial lines. So it was a really beautifully discussed topic and really inspirational and motivational for me. So I'm excited to support their book.
Yeah, so I think we have 14 copies. So who would like to start us out in our Q&A? Awesome, we have one coming up. And feel free, you don't have to wait for the question to be finished. You can start lining up behind the microphones too. Hi, welcome.
Hello. So I was curious, what is the most unexpected thing that you love about your job that you didn't go into it thinking you would like, and now you do?
That's a wonderful question. Am I still on here? Okay, can you hear me? What is the most unexpected thing that I didn't know that I would love that I do? It is honestly, we talk about the Vikings all the time about our platform for impact. It's a major pillar that we have as an organization. We understand the reach and the attention that we get by the fact that we're a major sports brand who influences, I mean, I see the Justin Jefferson jersey in the audience, right? And so we realize that people have their eyes on us, not only to watch our games, but also to get messaging and role modeling. And so it's a really huge, amazing opportunity that we have because we know that our voice will carry really far when we say something. So we have the ability to shape people's lives just by setting up maybe like a meet and greet with a player and a kid who may be experiencing a medical issue, right? And you change someone's life. I had, my cousin is a hospice nurse, and she emailed me several years ago saying one of her patients was a big Harrison Smith fan and was dying in hospice. And was there anything I could send her? And I got a signed Harrison Smith jersey, our starting safety, and her patient was buried in it. I mean, just those kind of things that are just like, okay, that is way more impactful than anything else that we can accomplish on the field. So those opportunities to really impact people's actual lives. I didn't think I knew the extent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll go over here.
Well, first I want to say thank you for being here and for such a powerful presentation. I wanted to reflect back on what you said about how your friend felt kind of nervous to show how much she had done in the past year or like really own how much she had actually done. And I wanted to ask you, where do you think, with your experience and with your life so far, where do you think the line is drawn between being too cocky with your achievements and then representing yourself well?
As long as you're not lying. I don't think there's a line. I think that what I've seen and what I've done to myself too as a woman is I've held back. I have not wanted to overrate or overstate my accomplishments, but that gets you nowhere. You're the only one looking out for you in your career. So if you don't speak up for yourself, nobody else might do it. So as long as you're not lying, I think it's fair to just state how incredibly awesome you are and everything that you achieved, and you should.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi.
Thank you first for coming to talk to us.
Yeah.
How do you encourage women in the workplace who are struggling with casual sexism and that kind of sexism that's really hard to identify and call out?
That is really hard, right? Like the comment I shared from the other GM at the meeting, that was obvious to anyone who was within ear range, right? But it is the kind of the paper cut stuff that can be harder. I think how I handle that, first of all, is by having a community, because sometimes you just need validation that you're not crazy, that bothered you. Like, it's okay, you can have someone in your workplace. I have a group of women in the NFL that we're connected on a thread, and we support each other, and we offer advice, and we're there for each other when things happen. Sometimes you just need someone that you can run that past and say, I feel like this bothered me. And sometimes you might not realize it right away. It could come to you later, and you're like, oh, I don't think that was right what they said to me. And sometimes just getting that validation is helpful. But also finding a male ally who you can mention that to, because there's a lot of power in active bystanders to be able to cut those kind of behaviors out in a different way than you can. Because sometimes when it's pointed out by a peer or by someone from their same demographic group, it can land differently to the person who said it. I also would try to discern, was this a microaggression, right? An unintended comment that still hurt. Like, I like to say, those are like if you had like an open wound on your arm that only you could see, and someone came by and just kind of tapped you. They didn't mean anything by it, but it hurt you really deeply. Was it something like that, or is it a pattern? And if it's a pattern, then that's a bigger issue. And that's where I would start to establish, okay, who are my friends, or who are the safe people that I can go to in my department that can help me confront this. But it's hard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed everything you had to share with us tonight.
Great.
My question is, as a leader, what is a point in time or a situation that you consider maybe a failure or something that you wish you would have done differently, and how did you turn that into a growth and learning opportunity for yourself?
Well, my biggest failure at work was actually not as a leader, but it was when I was a little more junior in my football role. And I literally paid Adrian Peterson $3 million like 6 months before he earned it, per his contract. So that was a tough conversation when I realized that error. That opened us up to a lot of risk. Anyway, it was fine. They didn't fire me. But mistakes happen, and that one was really bad, but it was fine. I will say, though, as a leader, where I've found my biggest failures to be, I get really excited when I have a good idea. And I kind of have an urgency about it, where it's almost like an epiphany happens, and I'm like, this needs to be priority number one, and let's go. But most things that you have to accomplish as part of a large organization, you can't do on your own. You need buy-in, you need collaboration from other departments, and they may not all be at the same level as you are. They may need some time to think about it and to understand the why behind why are we doing this. So I've had initiatives sort of die on the vine because I've tried to push them through really, really fast, because I think, to me, this is so obvious that this is the greatest thing that we could do right now. And then I lose, people along the way. So being impulsive instead of being strategic, I think, is where I found. Still working on it.
Thank you.
We talked about
Did you?
celebrating your mistakes in class last week, or it was one of the life hacks. And
Yeah.
so, a $3
hard.
million mistake, right?
Yeah.
You can come back from that.
You can come
That's
back
great.
from that, and I had support, so it was that one, and also one mistake doesn't speak for your body of work. Mm-hmm. It can feel like it in the moment, that you can take that to say, oh, I'm just a complete failure at everything. That's not true.
Right.
There was an oversight. And so the fact that I had a body of work that spoke for what I was capable of doing, if that was day one, that might have been a really big red flag.
Over here.
Hi,
Hi.
I was curious if you are involved in any women's sports, or what do you think about the WNBA and those sorts of leagues?
I would love to work for the WNBA, so if anyone's listening. Yeah, so first of all, love women's sports. I think we're kind of in a movement now where they're finally sort of starting to get a little bit more of the media attention that they deserve. WNBA free agency is going on right now, and I felt like all the rumors about where's Stewie gonna land, like, I don't think I saw that type of coverage ever for WNBA free agency before. And I was seeing, I mean, men and women, like, were dying to know where Breanna Stewart was gonna sign. And I was like, this is really, really cool. Like, this is just as exciting as following, NFL free agency should be. But as far as, are you asking if I work with any women's sports, or if?
Oh, I don't know, just as like a woman in sports,
Yeah.
Like, what is your opinion? Do you think that things are getting better?
Yeah, yes, exactly. So yes, I do, but just not nearly fast enough. It's a very like a chicken egg thing that's happening with women's sports. So you have two sides, and you have one side that thinks the sport needs to bring in the revenue first, and then they'll get the support of media and merchandising and marketing and all the things that can make them more sustainable. But I believe it's the opposite. You got to start with the publicity, the marketing, the merch, the television, major network coverage, give them better travel conditions, charter planes, and it will, then the revenue will just go crazy. Because I can tell you, I'm raising a 9 and 11-year-old, one girl, one boy, and my son, I don't think he discerns. He's 9, I don't think he discerns. He doesn't have an opinion either way on like, oh, what game are we going to tonight? Is it the women's team, Gophers or men's? Like that doesn't matter to him. If it's basketball, it's basketball. If it's whatever, and that's not the way it used to be either. So yeah, I think it's changing definitely, and just not as fast as we'd like.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Over here, there's lots of questions. I love it.
Okay, I just wanted to say I really enjoyed your presentation, and I also wanted to say that I know you majored in French.
Yeah.
I used to major in psychology, so I changed like 3 times. So now I'm in the College of Business. But my question is, how can young women cultivate and leverage a strong personal brand to support their advocacy efforts in the workplace?
To support their own advocacy
Yeah.
efforts? Be the woman who is looking out for other women, and just have that be known. That should be your brand.
Okay.
And then just demonstrate that. There's a million ways you can do that. You can, if you have the power to do this, right? Say, oh, shouldn't she be in this meeting too? Just find these sort of subtle ways to bring in and include other women. We are seeing. What I'm seeing is a shift in thinking about, I think it used to be, well, if women ascended to a certain level, it was because they had to claw and fight. And that's terrible. Like, it's terrible that was what it took for them to get there. But it doesn't mean that the next woman needs to do the same thing. If you can make it easier for them, you're not giving up anything about what you did to get there too. So I think as much as you can be seen as the includer, as a cheerleader, just if you see a female coworker doing something great, like tell her, build her up, because as we've been hearing and I shared, sometimes we don't believe in ourselves enough inherently, but if someone tells you that might just be kind of what you needed that day to sort of keep going and say, yeah, I am doing great work. So that's what I would do, is just be really open about how can I just cheer on the rest of the women I work with.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I would like to ask, given everything that you've accomplished in your career so far, and then as you mentioned, when you graduated with a bachelor's in French, I guess I'm just wondering, did you ever have just like an overwhelming sense of uncertainty of what you wanted to do with your career? And then if so, when did you feel like you overcame that, or like felt confident in your career path?
I don't know if I have, to be honest. I have taken so many twists and turns, and when I navigated out of the football ops role into DEI in 2019, I was 40 years old when I did that. And I remember, vividly, I moved into a brand new office with literally no roadmap. There was no head of DEI at any NFL team when I moved into that position. So, which is exciting and also super terrifying. But what I had was, I was at an age where I had grown my belief in my abilities. I said, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna figure it out. Like I have that confidence that I know I can figure this out, but I don't know what that looks like right now. And so that was just a few years ago. So I don't know that I ever got to that point where I'm like, yep, I'm doing it all perfectly and I'm a total expert at everything I do, but also that's okay because we should all be seeking to learn all the time. So you may not get there, but it doesn't mean you have to get there.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
We also talked about growth mindset last week.
Okay.
So I'm just loving
Yeah,
nerding out on
yeah,
everything
and
you're
it's
saying.
just, I mean, if you meet someone who tells you they have it all figured out, they're lying and you should run the other way and don't work for that person. Because then they don't have a growth mindset.
Yes.
If they're not supporting asking questions and exploring and poking holes in why do we do things this way, that's a red flag.
My question for you is, do you ever feel like you, even now with all like your experience and all the years you've been working, you still experience burnout? And if so, do you feel like you kind of can't take those breaks that you deserve because like you feel like you have to work extra hard with like the imposter syndrome that you kind of had at the start of your career?
Yes, yep. Yes, entirely. Especially with equity and inclusion and culture work and people. It's about people and their ability to succeed. And I take it really personally that it's an honor to be able to try and influence that. But it also comes with I want to do it so badly and support people so badly. And sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, it's not totally in my hands. I can try to influence, I can be strategic about things, but I can't just ultimately say, I'm going to pick all these people and put them in the C-suite and then take them and put them, So it's, and burnout is a super real thing, especially if you're doing DEI work. So I talk about this with my counterparts, which I now do have counterparts across the NFL. There's about a dozen of us and we're very close. And we talk about this all the time. I think there's the phrase rest is resistance. If you're aware of the NAP ministry, it's something you should look into, that we are such a American culture and American work culture can just be about pushing yourself so hard and that's the badge of honor, when really, if you can just rest a little bit, you're gonna be more effective. Put your oxygen mask on first, whole thing. I'm not great at it. Just ask my husband, who's probably watching the live stream. He knows I'm not very good at like setting it aside and just saying it's okay, I can let it rest for now, but I'm actively working on it, and I think that's what I can do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
How would you recommend like balancing the tightrope between like being an authoritative leader, but not an authoritarian one? Like,
Yep.
write them out.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, authoritative versus authoritarian. I think when you're a leader, as long as the people that you're leading can understand the why behind what you're asking or telling maybe them to do, if you feel the need that you need to be direct. I think where you can venture into authoritarian is when it feels like you just don't even have any understanding of why your leader or your boss is telling you that this is what needs to be done. So you're not bought in, so then you just feel like you're being yelled at and told, and your voice doesn't matter, your opinion doesn't matter. So I think there's a fine line of balancing, like you are the boss and you're the leader, so you do get to decide, but you can do some active listening first. You can say, here's what I'm thinking, what is your perspective? And then you can say, okay, here's what I heard from you, here's why I'm gonna go down this way, and this is what we need to do. And you can be very direct about that, but still allow people to be heard, and then just really be good about explaining the why. Telling someone to do something without the why behind it it's just not gonna work.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's so important. That resonates.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Hi.
Sorry, it's very tall and I'm not very tall. But,
I get it.
do you think that women should be given more opportunities and highlighted more than men to encourage a more diverse work environment?
That's a tough question. So it was, do I think women should be hired more than men to encourage a diverse work environment? So this is a tough one because it's like we're trying to fix a moving plane, right? So we are where we are right now because of decades of how the workplace was originally designed, right? It was designed for a heterosexual couple where the man was the breadwinner, the woman had her role at home. And we're still trying to actively undo these systems that, I mean, I can speak as a parent of 2 working full-time parents. The workplace is not necessarily always set up to support our lifestyle. It's designed to have someone at home and someone at work. And so adding more of the underrepresented, like whatever that group might be, if it's women in this case, if it's people of color in another case, is not necessarily the solution, at least not all at once, but you kind of have to, it's system change over individual change. So you have to first get people to understand why the system is how it is, how we got here, and then here are the incremental steps that we can put in place that will eventually lead us to a more equitable representation on our staff, but you just can't force it. You can't do it overnight. But what you can do is you can be intentional and you can target your efforts. So you can recruit from women more specifically. You can be intentional about creating programming that reaches out to women who maybe haven't considered that this is a career path they could take. We do a lot of that at the Vikings, where we do outreach. We want people to think, we want them to see people doing jobs that they didn't know they could do until they saw someone who looked like them doing it. That's really powerful. And eventually it will start to happen. But you really have to kind of do the hearts and minds thing first and have a really strategic approach while you also do those intentional efforts.
So you would say that educating the general populace is probably the most important step into integrating work environments.
That is what I have found. That's definitely the first step. Again, back to the why. If you just come in and say we're going to start hiring women at a 2-to-1 ratio with no explanation about why. Data is really powerful too. Data is my best friend. So anytime I can show trends, hey, we are losing women at these leadership levels, right? Maybe we're gaining women at entry level, but director and above, they're going down. Okay, now we can address that specifically. We can say, where are we recruiting from? Are we making sure that we have more women in our hiring slates at least to start with? So more women are getting a shot at the job. And then I do believe eventually then that starts to change your numbers. But it is really about the system and having people understand the why so they can impact change along with you.
So maybe highlight and encourage more women to go into specific roles of choice options. So people that more women choosing who has jobs versus putting those women into jobs.
That helps a lot. Are you saying women being the interviewers? And yep, that helps a ton. Same for people of color. If they're influencing the hiring decision, because pointing out bias in the interview process too is really important as well. So if you don't have a diverse group of interviewers who may pick up on things that are happening and keeping qualified people out because there's some perception of why they may not be good at the job, then you're maybe missing out on amazing people, and then this is where we get into this system. So there's all these steps that you can take to head that off for sure.
So solution is promote more people who are diverse and qualified into higher leadership roles, and the rest will fall, possibly.
Yes, that's one, for sure. That definitely will help, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
So I think we'll try to get through the last 5. Feel good?
Sure.
Okay.
My flight's not till tomorrow.
Hi. So my question is just like, when you have those kind of mental blocks and just kind of like the fear of not being good enough in your career, like what are ways to kind of get over that actively?
So I keep a yay file in my email, and I know that sounds really, really silly, but it's amazingly effective. Yeah, because I'll still have those moments where I'm like, I'm getting nowhere, is this worth it? Or I'll feel like I'm not doing enough. with DEI work, it's really easy to feel like you're not doing enough, because again, we can't overhaul systems by ourselves. So I'll go to my yay file, and that's where I've dropped in emails where people have expressed appreciation for like, oh, this really helped me today, or what you did, thank you for speaking with me because now it prepared me for that interview that I have and it was so helpful, or I got the job that you helped me be in position to get, and I read those and I take it in, and it's super restorative. Gratitude, so I guess that's my way of practicing gratitude without actually having to take the time to do a gratitude journal, which I hear are great. But it's a really simple way to just, every time I get like a nice thank you or a reminder of I am having an impact, the small wins, I toss it into that folder, and then I go back and read it whenever I just need like a little boost. It's really helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, the supervisor told me to do that in one of my first roles, so I have
Did
that
you?
same folder. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Hi, I'm curious, what made you want to switch from working on salary contracts to working in DEI?
Yes, great question that I get all the time. It evolved over time. So I was promoted to the director level on the football side in 2016, and it was at the same time that the NFL as a league started to get serious about trying to promote more women into football roles. By football roles, I mean coach, scout, salary cap like I was doing, trainers, equipment, the ones where you just haven't seen women in those positions. So that's when they hired Sam Rappaport, who I mentioned earlier, to lead those efforts. And the day I heard about her hire, I called her up and I said, I'm Ann, I'm at the Vikings, what can we do together? Please, let's go. I'm so excited that you are in that role, and I just want you to know that I'm here as a tenured woman at a club that wants to work with you. And so now she's one of my closest friends. We just started working together. When she had the Women's Careers Forum that I talked about, I spoke at that, and it's just where I just found my true passion was not just representing by being in a role, which is extremely powerful, so don't get me wrong, there's value in that. But I started to feel like there'd be so much more we could be doing if they would just let me, if it would just be my job, like literally stated in my job description. Here's what you can do to help change the culture so that it can be more open to people like you or anyone who might be different than what's been traditionally represented. So just thankfully, with the blessing of the organization, I wrote the job description and just proposed it. And they thought it was a cool idea. So but it was about aligning my values too. I felt a little bit out of alignment in my previous role, whereas now I feel like I'm in full alignment, which is really important because I totally believe in my efforts and what I'm doing. And I feel fortunate that I'm in a position where I can, because of my length with the team, kind of move things along in a good way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi.
So with all of the pushback in your career, did you ever get to a point where you wanted to, I guess, give up and try something different? And what motivated you to keep going and go further?
Yeah, definitely. I think what always keeps me going is just what I've built up. I think the equity that I've built up, and by that I mean the relationships that I have because I've been there so long. I feel like I'm uniquely positioned in a certain way to make progress that would be hard to replicate if I wasn't there. And so that's what keeps me going. So, but it's hard, and yeah, I think about that. It's really difficult, and are there some days when I just wish I had a desk job that was focused on numbers with no emotions and those kind of things? Yeah, sometimes, yes. But I think at the end of the day, it's just the little things. It's like the tiny wins. It's my former intern when I was on the football side, she's down in New Orleans today at the Tulane football negotiation competition. So I hired her out of Ohio State in 2018. And now she's a director of football administration for the Cleveland Browns at the age of 27 or something. And she texts me and she's like, I'm the only woman here judging this competition. And I was like, well, it's so great that you are there, and thank God you're there for the women who are part of the competition and can see that they don't have to be a man to get to where you are. And those kind of things keep me going because I'm like, if I was able to help her in her career, it's just going to continue to then she can help someone and it'll continue to snowball. So that's what keeps me going.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Something that I've been feeling that I'm sure a lot of people in this room relate to is this idea of I'm not getting the right experience, I'm not getting enough experience, or that other people right now are getting bigger and better experiences than I am to prepare for life after graduation. So my question for you is, obviously you're a French major. What kinds of things were you involved in college, and were you involved in anything that unexpectedly helped you, either in your entry-level position with the Vikings or where you're at now?
So hard to remember. No, I do have an answer to that. So the biggest experience that shaped me in college was I was the first female editor-in-chief of our school newspaper. And I put a lot of time into that. So it was literally I didn't sleep every Wednesday night because that was deadline night. And that taught me a lot. First of all, I loved the idea, the excitement and kind of the fast pace and the influence that I and my editorial team were able to have on my school by the journalism that we were able to practice. And I think that it really set me up I'm a disruptor, I think, at my core. And I think I started to kind of grow that muscle through my newspaper experience. I remember I had somewhat of a contentious relationship with the president of our college because sometimes she didn't love my takes on things. But when it came to graduation and commencement, we were beyond fortunate that our commencement speaker when I graduated from college was Helen Thomas, who was front row at the White House in the press corps as a woman before there were women doing that. She was just a complete legend. And I knew, I'm pretty sure the college president doesn't really care for me, but she invited me. She reached out and invited me to a VIP reception with Helen Thomas because she knew I was a young female journalist and I should meet her. And so I think that it encouraged me that you can kind of push and disrupt, but it doesn't have to be toxic. And it doesn't have to mean that you're breaking things down at the same time. And maybe it's good to push in a healthy way because obviously she had respect for me enough that she extended that invitation even if she didn't agree with some of my actions. So I don't know if that answered your question, but it kind of gave me a little taste of oh, okay, I can push and bring people along.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Hi.
Okay, well, I don't know if you'll hear me, but
I can repeat your question, so go ahead. I can hear you.
So I did want to see some clarification. Somebody asked earlier, I can't recall their question, but part of your response was that we either need to create spaces or create positions where you are seeing somebody similar to you, same sex, same race, in the position that you desire or that you want to achieve. Could you maybe clarify what you meant by that?
Yeah, so my response was along the lines of to make room for others. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think what I was saying is that being the only is not the goal, right? It's not. I think it can be really easy too to sort of fall into a trap when you are the only. I was that way on the football side, and sometimes I think that can go to someone's head and they feel like that's what their value is. But that's not true. That's not the goal. That doesn't mean anything about me. I'm not special because I'm the first or the only. But what I can do is wield that into, I'm going to advocate for more people to join me. It's the whole argument that equality is not pie. There's not a certain number of slices and then it's gone and then you don't get anything because someone else got your piece. That's not how this works. We have so many virtual meetings now, you can't even say there's not enough chairs in the room anymore to exclude someone. So I think that is probably what I was getting at is just pushing through and being the only one is not what it's about. It's a start, but it's also then that you have the responsibility to kind of send that elevator back down and bring someone else up with you.
Okay. Because also when I think when I initially heard your response, my first thought was, having the mindset of not seeing somebody that looks like me or is the same sex, same race, and then I can't do that position that I would like to achieve or think that I have the skill set for. I feel like that's a fixed mindset. And it would be more liberating to go like head forward, head straight into that position because you know your skill set. And maybe if that is, I guess what you're saying is if you are the first person there, then make room and advocate for other women as well. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think is what you're saying that it should, like, are you saying like it shouldn't necessarily matter as long as you believe in what you have to offer?
Yeah, I mean, I'm agreeing, yes, diversity and equity inclusion, very important, but to have the mindset is that, oh, I don't see somebody that looks like me, has the same race as me, anything like that, oh, I mustn't be able to do this job.
Yep.
I feel like that is a fixed mindset, you know?
Oh, right, okay, I hear what you're saying, yeah. So I think it just depends. I think some people may not believe it until they see that it's possible, and so if that can open something up for someone, then that is good. But you also do need to have that implicit belief and belief in yourself for sure. So, yeah. Yes. Yep.
I think avoiding that competition when it doesn't need to be a competition is also part of that. Like,
yes,
make it easier for people instead of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. 100%.
Let's all give Anne one more round of applause. Thank you.